everyone! Welcome back to another episode. I'm Catherine, your teacher, and today we're going to talk about something really important: why we chase perfection. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, it's never good enough? Or maybe you keep delaying a project because you're afraid of making mistakes. Trust me, you're not alone. Perfectionism is something so many people struggle with, and today we're going to break it down. Now, before we get into it, let's talk about how you can get the most out of this episode. Listening is powerful, but just listening once is not enough. You need to repeat, practice, and speak out loud. So when I ask you to repeat after me, do it. Say it out loud. You can also try shadowing, which means listening to me and speaking at the same time, trying to match my pronunciation and rhythm. And one more thing. If you hear a word or phrase you don't know, don't panic. Just keep listening. We'll break down important words naturally as we go. All right, now let's dive in. Perfection. It sounds like something we should all aim for, right? Doing things perfectly, making no mistakes, always getting things right. But here's the truth. Chasing perfection is exhausting, unrealistic, and often holds us back. Think about it. How many times have you stopped yourself from trying something new because you were afraid you wouldn't be good at it? How many times have you rewritten a message 10 times before sending it just to make sure it was perfect? Now, hold on a second. I just said exhausting. Let's pause here. Exhausting means something that makes you extremely tired, either physically or mentally. Come on, say it with me. Exhausting. Again, exhausting. One last time, exhausting. Let's put it in a sentence. She found studying for exams so exhausting that she needed a long break afterward. Now, let's bring it to real life. Trying to be perfect all the time is exhausting because you're constantly worrying about mistakes, and that takes a lot of energy. But why do we do this? Why do we feel this pressure to be perfect? A big part of it comes from society. From a young age, we're told to work hard, get good grades, be the best at everything. And while there's nothing wrong with aiming high, the problem is when we start believing that anything less than perfect is a failure. Think about social media. People post their best moments, their most perfect pictures, and their greatest achievements. And when we see that, we compare ourselves. We think, if they can be perfect, why can't I? But here's the thing. Perfection is an illusion. No one is perfect. What you see online is just the highlight reel, not reality. And the more we chase this impossible standard, the more we feel like we're never enough. Wait a minute. I just said illusion. Let's pause here. Illusion means something that appears to be real or true, but is actually false or misleading. Come on. Say it with me. Illusion. Again. Illusion. One last time. Illusion. Let's put it in a sentence. The idea of a perfect life on social media is just an illusion. Now, let's bring it to real life. Perfection itself is an illusion because no matter how much we try to be perfect, there will always be mistakes, flaws, and things we can improve. And that's okay. In the next part, we'll go even deeper, how perfectionism actually stops us from growing and learning. Because believe it or not, trying to be perfect can actually make us worse at things instead of better. So we've talked about how perfection is an illusion, something that looks real but isn't. But let's take this a step further. How does chasing perfection actually stop us from improving? See, the moment we start obsessing over perfection, we stop taking risks. We hesitate, we second-guess ourselves. And when we hesitate too much, we stop growing. Think about learning English. If you're always worried about making mistakes, you'll never speak with confidence. You'll hold back, and the more you hold back, the harder it gets to improve. That's why one of the biggest dangers of perfectionism is that it paralyzes us. It keeps us stuck in our heads, worrying about every little detail instead of just doing the thing. Hold on a second. I just said paralyzes. Let's pause here. Paralyze means to make someone or something unable to move, act, or function properly. Come on, say it with me. Paralyze. Again, paralyze. One last time, paralyze. Let's put it in a sentence. Fear of failure can paralyze you and stop you from reaching your full potential. Now let's bring it to real life. Perfectionism can paralyze people because they're so afraid of getting things wrong that they don't even try. Now tell me, how many times have you stopped yourself from doing something just because you thought you wouldn't be good at it? Maybe you wanted to start writing, but you kept thinking, what if it's not good enough? Maybe you wanted to try public speaking, but you told yourself, I'll do it when I'm ready. Guess what? That moment of being ready never comes, because the truth is, you learn by doing. And here's the second problem with perfectionism. It makes us procrastinate. Wait a minute, I just said procrastinate. Let's pause here. Procrastinate means to delay or postpone something that needs to be done, usually because it feels difficult or uncomfortable. Come on, say it with me. Procrastinate. Again, procrastinate. One last time. Procrastinate. Let's put it in a sentence. Many students procrastinate on their assignments until the last minute. Now, let's bring it to real life. Perfectionists often procrastinate because they're afraid their work won't be perfect, so they keep delaying it. You've probably experienced this, right? You keep putting things off because you want them to be just right. But in reality, the longer you wait, the harder it gets. And that's the real danger. Perfectionism doesn't just slow us down, it stops us completely. In the next part, we'll talk about why making mistakes is actually the best way to grow, and how you can start breaking free from perfectionism. So, we've talked about how perfectionism paralyzes us and makes us procrastinate. But let's go deeper. Why do we chase perfection in the first place? Most of the time, it's because we've been taught that mistakes are bad, that failing is embarrassing, that if you don't do something perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. And where does this come from? For many of us, it starts in school. Think about it. You grow up in a system where you're rewarded for being right and punished for being wrong. You get gold stars and high grades if you give the correct answer, and you get red marks and corrections if you don't. Over time, this conditions us to believe that mistakes are unacceptable. So, we start playing it safe. We stop asking questions because we don't want to look foolish. We stop trying new things because we don't want to fail. We start chasing perfection instead of chasing growth. But here's the thing, perfectionism is a trap, a deadly one. It prevents you from learning, from taking risks, from actually living. Because when you spend your life waiting to be perfect, you waste time that could have been spent getting better. Now, this isn't just about learning English or mastering a skill. It affects every part of life. People wait to launch a business until they feel perfectly prepared. They wait to start a creative project because they think they need more experience. They wait to speak up in meetings because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And in the end, they never do it. Hold on a second. I just said prevent. Let's pause here. Prevent means to stop something from happening or to make it impossible. Come on, say it with me. Prevent. Again, prevent. One last time. Prevent. Let's put it in a sentence. Fear of failure can prevent people from taking action toward their goals. Now, let's bring it to real life. Perfectionism often prevents us from taking risks because we're too scared of making mistakes. Think about that for a second. How many things has perfectionism stopped you from doing? Probably a lot, right? And this brings us to another dangerous effect of perfectionism. It leads to self-doubt. Wait a minute. I just said doubt. Let's pause here. Doubt means to feel uncertain or unsure about something, especially about your abilities or decisions. Come on, say it with me. Doubt. Again, doubt. One last time. Doubt. Let's put it in a sentence. Many people doubt themselves before trying something new, even when they're fully capable. Now, let's bring it to real life. Perfectionism makes people doubt their abilities because they feel like nothing they do is ever good enough. And you know what's crazy? The more you doubt yourself, the less you try. And the less you try, the less you improve. It's a vicious cycle. So, let's get this straight. Perfectionism prevents us from taking action, and it creates self-doubt. But here's the worst part. It also makes us extremely critical of ourselves. Have you ever noticed that perfectionists are their own worst enemies? They tear themselves apart over tiny mistakes. They focus on what went wrong instead of what went right. They judge themselves harshly, even when other people don't. It's exhausting, isn't it? And guess what? It doesn't just affect your personal life. It affects your mental health. Studies show that people who chase perfection are more likely to experience stress, anxiety, and even depression. Why? Because when you set an impossible standard for yourself, you're always disappointed. That's why if you want to grow, if you want to succeed at anything, you have to let go of perfection. And that's exactly what we'll talk about in the next part, how to break free from perfectionism and start embracing progress instead. So, we've unpacked the dangers of perfectionism, the way it stops us from taking action, makes us doubt ourselves, and even damages our mental health. But now, let's talk about something even more important. How do we break free from this cycle? Because let's be real, perfectionism doesn't just disappear overnight. It's something that's been ingrained in us for years. Maybe it started in childhood, maybe it developed from pressure at work or school. Whatever the case, we have to actively rewire our mindset if we want to escape it. And the first step, changing the way we measure success. Think about it. Most perfectionists measure success based on flawlessness. If something isn't done perfectly, it's a failure. If there's even one mistake, the whole thing is ruined. But this mindset is destructive, because in reality, success isn't about being perfect. It's about growth. It's about progress, learning, and getting better step by step. But here's the catch. Perfectionists hate progress. Why? Because progress means making mistakes along the way. It means not being great at something before you become good at it. And that's uncomfortable. But if we really want to improve, whether it's in language learning, career, relationships, or anything else, we have to embrace the process, not just the result. Wait a minute, I just said embrace. Let's pause here. Embrace means to accept something fully and willingly, especially something that might be difficult or unfamiliar. Come on, say it with me. Embrace. Again, embrace. One last time. Embrace. Let's see this word in a sentence. Instead of fearing mistakes, we should embrace them as part of the learning process. Now, let's bring it to real life. If we want to break free from perfectionism, we have to embrace imperfection and focus on progress instead. Now, let's get back to the topic. Another crucial step in overcoming perfectionism is redefining failure. Because here's the truth. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. Every successful person, whether it's an entrepreneur, an artist, or an athlete, has failed countless times. The difference? They didn't let failure define them. They saw it as a stepping stone, not a dead end. But perfectionists, They don't see failure as feedback. They see it as a personal attack. Instead of learning from mistakes, they dwell on them. Instead of trying again, they give up. And this is where everything starts to go downhill. So if we want to change, we have to stop seeing failure as a disaster and start seeing it as a teacher. Because honestly, failure teaches us more than success ever will. Now, let's talk about something that perfectionists really struggle with: letting go of control. You see, perfectionism isn't just about wanting things to be perfect, it's about wanting to control every outcome. Perfectionists want certainty. They want to predict results, eliminate risks, and avoid surprises. But here's the problem. Life doesn't work that way. Life is unpredictable. Mistakes will happen. Things will go wrong. You can't control everything. And the more you try to, the more stressed and frustrated you become. Hold on a second. I just said eliminate. Let's pause here. Eliminate means to completely remove or get rid of something. Come on, say it with me. Eliminate. Again, eliminate. One last time, eliminate. Let's see this word in a sentence. To reduce stress, we need to eliminate the pressure of being perfect all the time. Now, let's bring it to real life. Perfectionists try to eliminate every possibility of failure, but in doing so, they often eliminate opportunities for growth. And that's exactly why perfectionists feel stuck. Because instead of moving forward, they get trapped in an endless cycle of overthinking and fear. So, what's the solution? Simple. We need to learn to let go. We need to accept that not everything is within our control. We need to trust the process instead of constantly trying to manipulate every detail. Because when we let go of this impossible need for control, we actually gain more freedom. And you know what? This applies to learning English too. Think about it. How many times have you hesitated to speak because you were afraid of making a mistake? How many times have you stopped yourself from trying because you thought your English wasn't perfect yet? But here's the thing. Nobody speaks perfectly. Even native speakers make mistakes. Even fluent speakers have moments of hesitation. What matters isn't perfection. It's confidence. It's the ability to keep going even when you mess up. So, if you take one thing from this, let it be this. Perfectionism is a lie. It's an illusion that keeps you from reaching your full potential. And the only way to break free is to stop chasing perfect and start chasing progress. Because progress, that's where real success begins. So far, we've explored how perfectionism traps us in a cycle of unrealistic expectations. We've talked about how it makes us afraid of failure, how it keeps us from taking action, and how it tricks us into believing that we need to be flawless to be worthy of success. But now, let's go even deeper. Because one of the biggest reasons we chase perfection isn't just about how we see ourselves. It's about how we think others see us. And this right here, this is where perfectionism gets really toxic. Because let's be honest, most of our fears around perfectionism come from a fear of judgment. We don't just want to do things perfectly for ourselves. We want to do them perfectly so that others don't criticize us. We don't want to make mistakes because we're afraid of what people will think. Will they laugh at us? Will they judge us? Will they think we're not good enough? And so, instead of putting ourselves out there, we hesitate. We hold back. We overthink. We get stuck in this loop where we'd rather do nothing than risk doing something imperfectly. But let's pause for a moment and ask ourselves, who are we really trying to impress? Because here's the truth. Most people don't care as much as we think they do. You know that embarrassing mistake you made 5 years ago that still haunts you? Nobody remembers it but you. That project you scrapped because you thought it wasn't perfect? Nobody even saw it, so they never had the chance to judge it. We are our own worst critics. We judge ourselves far more harshly than anyone else ever will. Hold on a second. I just said criticize. Let's pause here. Criticize means to express disapproval of something or to point out faults in a negative way. Come on, say it with me. Criticize. Again, criticize. One last time, criticize. Let's see this word in a sentence. Instead of focusing on self-growth, many perfectionists are too afraid that others will criticize them for making mistakes. Now let's bring it to real life. When we let the fear of being criticized control us, we stop taking risks, and that's the biggest mistake of all. Back to the topic. So, what happens when we live in fear of judgment? We become people pleasers. We stop asking ourselves, what do I want? And instead we start thinking, what do others expect from me? And before we know it, we're trapped in a life that isn't even ours. We're making choices based on what will impress others, not what will make us happy. But let me tell you something. Chasing perfection for the sake of approval is exhausting. It's like running on a treadmill that never stops. No matter how fast you run, no matter how hard you try, you'll never reach the finish line. Because perfection isn't real. And even if you do everything perfectly, there will always be someone who finds something to criticize. So instead of chasing approval, what if we just let go? What if we stopped worrying about what people think and focused on what actually matters? This is where the power of imperfection comes in. Because when we embrace imperfection, we give ourselves permission to be human. We free ourselves from the pressure of always having to get it right. We take risks, we experiment, we learn, and most importantly, we grow. And you know what's crazy? Imperfection makes us more relatable. Think about your favorite people, the ones who inspire you the most. Are they perfect? Or do they have flaws? Have they made mistakes? Have they failed? The truth is, we connect with people who are real, not with people who seem flawless. Flaws make us human. Mistakes make us stronger. Imperfection is what makes us unique. Wait a minute. I just said experiment. Let's pause here. Experiment means to try something new to see what happens, often in a way that involves testing or taking risks. Come on, say it with me. Experiment. Again. Experiment. One last time. Experiment. Let's see this word in a sentence. Instead of aiming for perfection, we should experiment with different approaches and learn from the results. Now, let's bring it to real life. Many successful people experiment with different strategies before they find what truly works for them. Now, let's tie it all together. The key to escaping the perfectionist trap isn't about being careless or not trying. It's about releasing the unrealistic pressure to be flawless and allowing ourselves to be a work in progress. It's about focusing on the journey instead of obsessing over the outcome. It's about understanding that failure is not a reflection of our worth. It's a stepping stone to success. And most importantly, it's about choosing authenticity over perfection. Because when we let go of the need to be perfect, we gain something much more valuable: freedom. So, from now on, instead of asking yourself, is this perfect? Ask yourself, is this real? Is this helping me grow? Is this bringing me joy? Because at the end of the day, that's what truly matters. So we've talked about how perfectionism traps us, how it's rooted in fear of judgment, and how embracing imperfection frees us to live authentically. But there's another deep reason we chase perfection: control. See, when we try to be perfect, what we're really doing is trying to control everything around us. We want to control outcomes, control people's perceptions of us, control every little detail so nothing ever goes wrong. But here's the harsh truth. Control is an illusion. No matter how much we try to plan, prepare, or perfect things, life will always be unpredictable. We can spend hours perfecting a project, only for someone to still find a flaw. We can rehearse a speech 100 times and still forget a word. We can try to control our image, but people will always form their own opinions. The more we chase control, the more we set ourselves up for disappointment. And this is where perfectionism gets really dangerous, because when things don't go according to plan, we blame ourselves. We think, if only I had worked harder, if only I had done it better, if only I had planned more, this wouldn't have happened. But let's pause for a second. Is that really true? Or is it just perfectionism lying to us again? Because the reality is, failure is not always a reflection of our effort. Sometimes things go wrong because of circumstances beyond our control. External factors exist, mistakes happen, unexpected challenges arise. Hold on a second, I just said circumstances. Let's pause here. Circumstance means a condition or fact that affects a situation, often something beyond our control. Come on, say it with me, circumstance. Again, circumstance. One last time, circumstance. Let's see this word in a sentence. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, unexpected circumstances prevent things from going as planned. Now, let's bring it to real life. Success isn't just about hard work. It's also about adapting to circumstances and making the best of them. Back to the topic. So, if we can't control everything, what should we do? The answer is simple. We focus on what we can control. Instead of obsessing over being perfect, we focus on progress. Instead of trying to avoid all mistakes, we learn from them. Instead of fearing failure, we redefine it. Because failure, it's just feedback. Think about the most successful people in the world. Do you think they got there by being perfect? Number. They got there by failing over and over and refusing to give up. Perfectionism tells us that failure means we're not good enough. But the truth is, failure is proof that we are trying. And the best thing we can do is embrace the process. Wait a minute. I just said redefine. Let's pause here. Redefine means to change the way something is understood, seen, or interpreted. Come on, say it with me, redefine. Again, redefine. One last time, redefine. Let's see this word in a sentence. Instead of seeing failure as the end, we need to redefine it as a stepping stone to success. Now, let's bring it to real life. Many successful entrepreneurs had to redefine their failures as lessons before they finally achieved their goals. Now, let's tie it all together. At the core of perfectionism is the fear of losing control. But when we stop chasing control and start focusing on growth, learning, and resilience, we actually gain something much more powerful: freedom. Because here's the truth. We don't need to be perfect to be worthy of success. We just need to show up, do our best, and trust that we are enough just as we are. So, we've already tackled how perfectionism is tied to control and fear of failure. But let's dig even deeper into something more personal: our self-worth. At the core of perfectionism is this nagging voice in our heads that whispers, "You're not good enough." Think about it. Why do we feel the need to be perfect? Why do we put so much pressure on ourselves to perform flawlessly, to meet impossible standards, to constantly seek validation? Because deep down, we equate our worth with our achievements. We think, if I do everything perfectly, then I'll be loved. If I never fail, then I'll be respected. If I always meet expectations, then I'll finally be enough. But let's pause for a second. Who decided that our worth is based on how flawless we are? Who said that making mistakes makes us less valuable? Hold on a second. I just said equate. Let's pause here. Equate means to consider one thing to be the same as another, even when they might not be. Come on, say it with me. equate. Again, equate. One last time, equate. Let's see this word in a sentence. Many people equate success with happiness, but in reality, true happiness comes from within. Now, let's bring it to real life. If we constantly equate our self-worth with perfection, we'll always feel like we're falling short. Back to the topic. This belief that we must be perfect to be loved or respected, it's a lie. But it's a powerful lie because society feeds it to us every single day. Think about social media. We scroll through these curated versions of people's lives where everything looks flawless. We see people achieving their dreams, looking their best, living extraordinary lives. And what do? We compare. We see someone's success, and instead of feeling inspired, we feel inadequate. We think, they have it all together, and I'm a mess. But let me tell you something real. Nobody has it all together. That influencer with the perfect life, they struggle too. That CEO who seems unstoppable, they have doubts. That person who seems so confident, they have insecurities. Because being human means being imperfect. And the moment we stop chasing this illusion of perfection is the moment we actually start living. Wait a minute. I just said curate. Let's pause here. Curate means to carefully select, organize, or present something in a particular way, often to create a specific impression. Come on, say it with me. Curate. Again, curate. One last time. Curate. Let's see this word in a sentence. Social media allows people to curate their lives, showing only the best moments and hiding their struggles. Now, let's bring it to real life. Instead of comparing ourselves to the carefully curated images we see online, we should focus on our own personal growth. Now, let's tie it all together. Perfectionism convinces us that we must earn our worth, that we are only as valuable as our successes, only as lovable as our achievements, only as important as our ability to avoid mistakes. But that's not true. We are worthy, even when we fail. We are enough, even when we make mistakes. We don't need to prove ourselves through perfection. We just need to show up as we are. The moment we embrace that truth, we stop chasing perfection and start living with freedom. You know what's funny? Perfectionism isn't just about being flawless. It's about fear. Fear of making a mistake, fear of being criticized, fear of looking foolish, fear of people seeing our flaws. And here's the thing. Perfectionism isn't about impressing ourselves. It's about impressing others. Think about it. When we obsess over every detail of an email before hitting send, it's not because we're worried about the grammar. It's because we're afraid of what someone will think. When we hesitate to post something online, it's not because we don't believe in our message. It's because we're scared of how others will judge it. When we hold back in a conversation, it's not because we don't have thoughts to share. It's because we're worried we'll sound stupid. We let the fear of judgment hold us hostage. Hold on a second. I just said, obsess. Let's pause here. Obsess means to think about something too much, often in a way that is unhealthy or unnecessary. Come on, say it with me. Obsess. Again, obsess. One last time. Obsess. Let's see this word in a sentence. Some people obsess over tiny mistakes, even when they don't matter in the bigger picture. And another example, if we obsess over being perfect, we'll never be happy with what we achieve. Back to the topic. Perfectionists aren't aiming for excellence. They're trying to protect themselves. Because let's be real, judgment hurts. Nobody enjoys feeling like they've disappointed someone. Nobody likes being criticized. Nobody wants to be seen as less than. But here's the hard truth. We cannot control how others see us. We can try our best, work as hard as possible, perfect every tiny detail. But in the end, People will think what they want. Some will love us, some won't. Some will admire our efforts. Some will find something to criticize. And that's okay, because other people's opinions, they don't define us. Think about the people you admire. Do you admire them because they're perfect or because they're real? Because they show up, flaws and all, and still keep going? Now, let's talk about something even deeper. Why we fear judgment so much. A lot of it comes from childhood. When we were kids, we were taught to please people, be good, follow the rules, make the teacher happy, make our parents proud. We learned that approval equals safety. If people liked us, we were safe. If they didn't, we felt like something was wrong with us. That conditioning sticks. Even as adults, we seek approval the same way. But instead of parents and teachers, now it's bosses, colleagues, friends, and strangers on the internet. We internalize this belief that if we're not perfect, we won't be accepted. Wait a minute. I just said internalize. Let's pause here. Internalize means to accept an idea, belief, or attitude so deeply that it becomes part of how you think or behave, often without questioning it. Come on, say it with me. Internalize. Again, internalize. One last time, internalize. Let's see this word in a sentence. When children are constantly criticized, they may internalize the belief that they are never good enough. And another example, if we internalize perfectionism, we will always feel pressured to meet impossible standards. Back to the topic. The truth is, judgment is unavoidable. No matter what we do, someone will have an opinion. So instead of trying to be perfect to avoid judgment, we should focus on being authentic, because authenticity is freedom. When we stop trying to be what others expect and start being who we truly are, we no longer feel trapped by perfectionism. Perfection is an illusion. But being real, being genuine, that's powerful. And when we let go of the fear of judgment, we finally give ourselves permission to live. Now, let's talk about the hidden cost of perfectionism. Because it's not just about stress. It goes way deeper. Think about how much energy perfectionism consumes. Every task takes longer. Every decision feels heavy. Every mistake feels like a crisis. And what happens? We get burned out. Hold on. I just said consume. Let's pause here. Consume means to use up, to take in, or to absorb something completely. It can refer to food, energy, thoughts, or emotions. Come on, say it with me. Consume. Again, consume. One last time, consume. Let's see this word in a sentence. If we let stress consume us, we won't have the energy to focus on what truly matters. And another example, perfectionism consumes our time and mental energy, leaving us drained. Back to the topic, perfectionists often push themselves too hard. We don't take breaks because we feel guilty. We don't rest because we think we should be doing more. We ignore the warning signs of exhaustion, thinking, I'll slow down once I finish this. But there's always something else to perfect, and guess what? The harder we push, the less effective we become. Our brains get foggy, our creativity fades. Instead of excelling, we're just surviving. That's how perfectionism leads to burnout. And here's the worst part, it steals opportunities. Wait a minute, I just said steal. Let's pause here. Steal means to take something without permission or to take something away from someone, not always in a criminal sense. Come on, say it with me. Steal. Again, steal. One last time. Steal. Let's see this word in a sentence. Perfectionism steals joy because we're never satisfied with what we achieve. And another example, fear of failure steals opportunities because we hesitate to take risks. Back to the topic, perfectionism doesn't just slow us down, it stops us. We hesitate, we overthink, we miss out. Think about all the dreams people abandon because they think they're not good enough. The book someone never writes, the business someone never starts, the conversation someone never has, the opportunity someone lets pass. Not because they can't do it, but because they think they have to be perfect first. But here's the truth. You don't have to be perfect to start. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to have the perfect plan. You just have to begin, because action creates confidence, and confidence leads to growth. But waiting for perfection, that just leads to regret. So the real question is, are you willing to let go of perfectionism, even if it feels uncomfortable? Because perfectionism isn't protecting you. It's holding you back. Perfectionism isn't just about being the best. It's about feeling in control. We think that if we do everything perfectly, we can avoid failure, rejection, or criticism. But here's the hard truth. Perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. And the more we chase it, the more we realize we're not actually in control at all. Because no matter how much we plan, no matter how much we refine, we can't control everything. We can't control how people react to us. We can't control how the world perceives us. We can't control every outcome. And perfectionism, it doesn't protect us. It paralyzes us. Wait a second. I just said perceive. Let's pause here. Perceive means to become aware of something, to understand or interpret something in a certain way. It's about how we see things, how we process information, and how we form opinions. Come on, say it with me. Perceive. Again. Perceive. One last time. Perceive. Let's put it in a sentence. People often perceive confidence as competence, even when someone is not an expert. And another example, the way we perceive ourselves can affect how we act in social situations. Back to the topic. Perfectionists live with this fear. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if people judge me? And because of that fear, we hesitate. We delay sending that email. We overthink before posting that video. We edit and edit and edit instead of finishing. Not because we're improving, but because we're scared of letting go. Perfectionism becomes an excuse to procrastinate. Hold on, I just said procrastinate. Let's pause here. Procrastinate means to delay or postpone something, usually because of fear, indecision, or a lack of motivation. Come on, say it with me. Procrastinate. Again, procrastinate. One last time. Procrastinate. Let's put it in a sentence. People often procrastinate on important tasks because they fear failure. And another example. If you procrastinate too much, opportunities will pass you by. Back to the topic. The irony, the longer we procrastinate, the more pressure we feel. The pressure builds up until we either rush to finish at the last minute or we don't finish at all. And then we feel guilty. We beat ourselves up. We think, why can't I just get things done? But here's the thing. We don't need more discipline. We need less fear. Because perfectionism isn't about high standards. It's about fear of failure. And the only way to break free? To accept that failure is part of the process. You can't improve without making mistakes. You can't grow without struggling. And if you wait for perfect, you'll never start. So ask yourself, are you aiming for excellence or are you avoiding failure? Because there's a difference. And if you truly want to move forward, you have to let go of the illusion of control. Perfectionism doesn't just slow us down. It suffocates our creativity. Because when we're obsessed with getting everything right, we don't take risks. We don't experiment. We don't push boundaries. We just stay in this safe little box where we keep refining, fixing, editing, but never really creating. And that's the saddest part. Perfectionism doesn't lead to mastery. It leads to stagnation. Think about it. Have you ever spent hours rewriting an email just because you wanted every word to be flawless? Have you ever held back from sharing your work because you thought it wasn't ready yet? Have you ever hesitated to speak up in a meeting because you weren't sure if your idea was good enough? That's perfectionism strangling your potential. And the worst part? The more we chase perfection, the more dissatisfied we feel, because nothing ever feels done. Nothing ever feels good enough. We keep raising the bar, pushing the goal further, convincing ourselves that we'll feel satisfied once it's perfect. But that moment never comes. Wait a minute. I just used dissatisfied. Let's pause here for a second. Dissatisfied means not happy or content with something, feeling like something is not enough or not as good as expected. It's different from unsatisfied, which just means something is incomplete. Dissatisfied is about disappointment, frustration, or feeling let down. Come on, say it with me. Dissatisfied. Again, dissatisfied. One last time. Dissatisfied. Let's put it in a sentence. She felt dissatisfied with her job because it wasn't as fulfilling as she had hoped. And another example, no matter how much money he made, he always felt dissatisfied, like something was missing. Back to the topic. The truth is, perfectionism makes us miserable. Because we think we're working toward excellence, but what we're actually doing is setting ourselves up for frustration. There is no perfect project, no perfect performance, no perfect moment. And if we keep waiting for things to be perfect before we move forward, we'll be stuck in limbo forever. Hold on, I just said limbo. Let's pause here for a second. Limbo means a state of uncertainty, where things are unresolved, unclear, or stuck. It's like being trapped between two places, where you're not moving forward, but you're not exactly failing either. Just stuck. Come on, say it with me. Limbo. Again, limbo. One last time. Limbo. Let's put it in a sentence. After quitting his job, he was stuck in limbo, unsure of what to do next. And another example. The project was in limbo for months because no one could make a decision. Back to the topic. This is what perfectionism does. It keeps us in limbo, always refining, always fixing, but never actually finishing. And if we never finish, we never improve, we never learn from real feedback, we never progress. So ask yourself, are you perfecting or are you procrastinating? Are you refining or are you avoiding? Because at some point, we have to say it's done. Not perfect, but done. And here's the thing. Perfectionism doesn't just affect our work. It affects our self-worth. Because when we tie our value to how flawless something is, we start to believe that mistakes make us unworthy. That if something isn't perfect, then we aren't good enough. And that belief is exhausting. It's suffocating. It makes us feel like no matter how much effort we put in, it's never enough. So we hesitate, we hold back, we become afraid of showing our work, afraid of trying new things, afraid of looking foolish. Because in our minds, anything less than perfect equals failure. But that's a distorted way of thinking. Wait a second, I just used distorted. Let's pause here for a second. Distorted means twisted, inaccurate, or misleading. It can be used for thoughts, perceptions, sounds, images, anything that doesn't reflect reality correctly. When something is distorted, it's not clear or true. Come on, say it with me. Distorted. Again, distorted. One last time, distorted. Let's put it in a sentence. Her view of success was distorted. She believed she had to be perfect to be valuable. And another example. The sound was distorted because of the poor microphone quality. Back to the topic. Perfectionism distorts our perception. It makes us believe that only flawless work is worthy of recognition, that only when something is immaculate should we put it out into the world. But the truth is, progress is messy. Growth is imperfect. And if we let this obsession with flawlessness control us, we'll never experience real improvement. And you know what's even worse? Perfectionism stops us from enjoying the process. Because instead of experiencing something, we're constantly judging it. Instead of allowing ourselves to explore, we're constantly evaluating. And that pressure drains all the joy from what we do. We get so focused on results that we forget to appreciate the journey. And that brings me to another problem. When we chase perfection, we tend to overlook what we've already accomplished. Hold on. I just said overlook. Let's pause here for a second. Overlook means to fail to notice something, to ignore, or to not give enough attention to something important. When we overlook something, we miss it, even if it's right in front of us. Come on, say it with me. Overlook. Again. Overlook. One last time. Overlook. Let's put it in a sentence. She was so focused on her mistakes that she overlooked all the progress she had made. And another example. Many people overlook small wins because they're too busy chasing perfection. Back to the topic. This is what perfectionism does. It makes us overlook our progress. It makes us blind to how far we've come because we're too focused on how far we think we still need to go. It's an endless chase, a race without a finish line. And in the end, it only leads to frustration. So let's ask ourselves, are we setting realistic goals? Or are we setting ourselves up for constant dissatisfaction? Are we striving for excellence? Or are we trapped in an impossible cycle of never feeling good enough? Because if we don't learn to break free from this, we'll spend our lives in a constant state of frustration, always fixing, always improving, but never truly feeling fulfilled. And the biggest irony, perfectionism doesn't actually make us better. It makes us stagnate. It keeps us stuck in this loop where we're afraid to take risks, afraid to try new things, afraid to put ourselves out there. Because what if it's not good enough? What if people judge us? What if we fail? Hold up. I just said stagnate. Let's pause here for a second. Stagnate means to stop developing, to become inactive, or to stay the same without progress. When something stagnates, it doesn't move forward. It just stays stuck. Come on, say it with me. Stagnate. Again, stagnate. One last time, stagnate. Let's put it in a sentence. His fear of failure made him stagnate instead of improving his skills. And another example. Without feedback, her work started to stagnate because she wasn't learning from her mistakes. Back to the topic. This is what perfectionism does. It makes us stagnate. Because instead of focusing on doing, we focus on fixing. We don't create, we correct. We don't take action, we hesitate. And this hesitation kills momentum. It makes us afraid to take the next step because we're too focused on perfecting the step we just took. But here's the truth. The only way to get better at something is to actually do it. To make mistakes, to learn from them, to move forward, not to sit there endlessly tweaking the same thing over and over again. And here's another thing. Perfectionism doesn't just hold us back. It actually undermines our confidence. Wait, I just used undermine. Let's pause here for a second. Undermine means to weaken, to damage, or to make something less effective over time. When something is undermined, it loses strength, value, or impact. Come on, say it with me. Undermine. Again, undermine. One last time. Undermine. Let's put it in a sentence. Constant self-doubt will undermine your confidence and make you afraid to take action. And another example. If you focus too much on small mistakes, you'll undermine your overall progress. Back to the topic. Perfectionism undermines confidence because it makes us feel like we're never good enough. No matter how much we improve, we always find something wrong. No matter how much we achieve, we always feel like it's not enough. And this creates a cycle where we don't trust ourselves. We don't believe in our own abilities. Instead of seeing our strengths, we fixate on our weaknesses. Instead of acknowledging our progress, we obsess over our flaws. Now, back to what we were saying. I remember once obsessing over a podcast episode I was editing. It wasn't just about the sound or the flow. I kept tweaking and adjusting every little pause, every single breath. And then it hit me. I wasn't improving it. I was actually overcomplicating the entire process and delaying the release. I wasn't chasing quality anymore. I was chasing perfection, and it was costing me progress. You know, this constant chase of perfection often blinds us to the beauty of what already is. The raw, the real, the slightly flawed, that's where authenticity lives. And if I'm being completely honest with you, it's the imperfect things that often resonate the most with people. Because they feel human, they feel real. And this realization didn't just come out of nowhere. It was after countless moments of pushing myself too far, of feeling drained yet dissatisfied. That's when I knew something had to shift. I needed to reevaluate what I was doing and why. Wait a second, I just said reevaluate. Let's hold on here. Reevaluate means to think again about something to decide whether you should change your opinion or judgment. You usually reevaluate a situation when new information arises or when something isn't working as expected. Come on, say it with me, reevaluate. Once again, reevaluate. One last time, reevaluate. Let's put it in a sentence. After months of stress and burnout, she decided to reevaluate her priorities and slow down. Let's see another one. The team had to reevaluate their strategy after their initial plan failed. Okay, back to the story. Once I started to reevaluate my expectations, I noticed how much more space I had to be creative. It wasn't about compromising quality. It was about allowing room for flexibility and exploration. And you know what? That freedom brought joy back into my work. It wasn't a task anymore. It was something I looked forward to again. Another time, I was working on a public speaking event. I'd rehearsed and rehearsed until every word was etched into my brain. But when I finally stepped on stage, my mic glitched halfway through. Just stopped working. Total silence. Now, old me would have spiraled. But something shifted. I adapted. I used the moment to connect with the audience. I even joked about it. And it turned out that glitch, that imperfection, it became the most talked about part of the event. Because it was real. It was raw. And it showed resilience. Wait. Resilience. Let's pause right here. Resilience means the ability to recover quickly from difficulties or setbacks. It's that inner strength that helps you bounce back, adapt, and keep going, even when things go wrong. Come on, you're not skipping this one. Resilience. Again, louder. Resilience. One more time with feeling. Resilience. Let's use it in a sentence. Even after several rejections, she showed resilience and kept applying for her dream job. Here's another one. Children often show incredible resilience after challenging experiences. Now, let's circle back. Because here's the thing, perfection tells us that if we don't get it absolutely right the first time, we're not good enough. But resilience tells us, get up, try again, tweak, improve, learn, and evolve. That's the story we should be embracing. The pursuit of perfection can be so intoxicating that we sometimes forget what we were trying to create in the first place. We become so fixated on the tiny details that we lose sight of the big picture. And when you're lost in that maze, it's really easy to confuse movement with progress. But movement doesn't always mean progress. You can spin in circles for hours and end up nowhere. It's only when you pause, reflect, reevaluate, and apply resilience that you begin to move forward with intention. I know many of you listening right now have probably put off something. A project, a video, a blog post, maybe even a conversation, because it didn't feel perfect. And I get it. I really do. But ask yourself, what's the cost of waiting for perfect? How much time are you losing? How many experiences are you missing? Let's be honest. Done is often better than perfect. You can always iterate. You can always go back and refine. But you can't revise what was never started. Let me share another quick personal moment. I once scrapped an entire podcast episode because I didn't like the way my voice sounded that day. But weeks later, I found the draft again and listened with fresh ears. And you know what? It was actually one of my better takes. My perspective had shifted. What felt imperfect then felt authentic later. So sometimes it's not the work that needs to change. It's our mindset, our expectations. And hey, you don't have to drop your standards, but you do need to remember that excellence and perfection aren't the same thing. Excellence embraces growth, learning, and improvement. Perfection paralyzes us with fear of making mistakes. If you've ever been caught in the loop of tweaking, editing, polishing endlessly, trust me, you're not alone. But the sooner you give yourself permission to be human, the sooner you'll find peace in progress. And I know it's easier said than done, especially in a world that glorifies the highlight reel, filters, and polished content. But behind every perfect-looking post, there's a sea of drafts, doubts, and do-overs. You're not falling behind, you're just human. And that's okay. Before we wrap this part, let's do a quick reminder of all the words we've broken down so far so I don't repeat any in the upcoming parts. So far, we've covered realign, confront, reevaluate, and resilience. So where were we? Yes, the chase. This relentless pursuit of perfection. You know, I often catch myself staring at someone's perfectly curated Instagram grid or watching someone deliver a flawless TED Talk, and for a split second, I wonder, am I falling short? And I bet I'm not alone in that feeling. This subconscious pressure creeps in without warning, whispering, you should do more. Be more. Fix yourself. And that right there, my friend, is where the rabbit hole begins. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe in growth. I advocate for progress. But the line between improvement and obsession, it's razor thin. Sometimes we end up overcomplicating our lives just to meet some arbitrary ideal of perfection. And in doing so, we often ignore the beauty of the present moment, of the perfectly imperfect now. And speaking of overcomplicating, wait a second. I just said overcomplicate. That's our next word. Let's pause here for a moment. Overcomplicate. Come on, say it with me. Overcomplicate. Once again, overcomplicate. One last time, overcomplicate. Now, to overcomplicate something means to make it more difficult or complex than necessary. And let's be honest, we do that a lot. Let's put it in a sentence. You don't need 10 apps to manage your day. Don't overcomplicate your life. Let's see another. He tends to overcomplicate every project, turning simple ideas into chaotic messes. You see how easy that was? Don't overcomplicate the process of learning either. Focus on clarity and action. Now, getting back, I sometimes wonder, why do we make everything harder than it needs to be? Why can't we just enjoy things for what they are, without the need to tweak, polish, and perfect every detail? Maybe because perfection gives us a sense of control, and control feels safe. But guess what? Life isn't safe. It isn't always clean or elegant or flawless. Sometimes it's messy, unpredictable, and raw. And that, my friend, is where the magic hides. Let me tell you about a moment that hit me like a wave. I was preparing for a presentation a while ago. Slides, transitions, quotes, pacing. I had worked on it for days. And right before going on stage, I felt it. That little voice whispering that maybe it's not good enough. Maybe it needs more finesse, more polish. But instead of tweaking it to death, I just walked up, spoke from the heart, and embraced the imperfections. And the feedback? It was the best I ever received. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. We often undermine our value in the name of perfection. Oh, wait. Hold up a second. I just used undermine. Let's break that one down. Undermine. Come on. Say it out loud with me. Undermine. Again. Undermine. One last time. Undermine. To undermine something is to gradually weaken it or make it less effective. Let's see this word in a sentence. Constant criticism can undermine a person's confidence. Another one. She didn't mean to, but her comments undermined the whole team's effort. You feel that? Sometimes we undermine ourselves without realizing. Every time we say, I'm not good enough, or I need to be perfect, we're slowly weakening our own confidence. And that's the catch. We keep moving the goalpost. Today it's about looking perfect. Tomorrow it's about speaking perfectly. And the next day it's about living perfectly. It never ends. That's why chasing perfection feels like trying to grab smoke. It slips right through. So here's a little truth bomb. Perfection is not a goal. It's a trap. And once you realize that, the pressure starts to lift. You start allowing yourself to just be, to laugh awkwardly, to trip over your words, to share messy thoughts. Because in that space, real connection happens. Do you remember the last time you had a truly deep conversation with someone? Was it because everything was polished and rehearsed? Or was it because they showed you their real, unfiltered self? I'd bet everything on the second one. And yet, we forget that others love us more when we're real. They don't want the performance. They want the presence. Let me get a bit personal here. I used to record my videos 10 times over, editing out every breath, every stumble, every imperfect moment. And while the final result looked polished, something felt missing. The spark. The soul. So I stopped. I started embracing the occasional, the crooked smile, the unplanned laugh. And would you believe it? That's when people started saying, "You feel real, Catherine." So I'll ask you now, are you living your life as a highlight reel? Or are you living it in full, messy, beautiful color? Because here's the kicker. In our attempt to look perfect, we sometimes lose authenticity. And authenticity, that's what the world truly craves. Not filters, not flawless speeches, not manufactured excellence. Just you showing up with all your cracks and colors. You know, sometimes I sit by the window with a cup of tea, just observing the way the light shifts through the leaves. It's a quiet moment, but it grounds me. It reminds me that I don't always have to chase something. I don't have to hustle every second. I don't need to constantly prove my worth to anyone, not even myself. And that stillness, it teaches me more than any book ever could. But in our loud, busy world, we rarely acknowledge those moments. Ah, wait, did you catch that? I said acknowledge. That's a word worth slowing down for. Let's pause here for a breakdown. Acknowledge. Come on, say it with me. Acknowledge. Again, acknowledge. One more time. Acknowledge? To acknowledge something means to recognize it, accept it, or admit that it exists or is true. Let's see a few examples. He failed to acknowledge her effort, even though she worked hard. Another one. Sometimes the first step to healing is to acknowledge the pain. And one more. We must acknowledge our achievements, even the small ones. You see how powerful that word is? When we acknowledge our thoughts, feelings, or truths, we're not hiding anymore. We're facing things. Honestly, gently, boldly. And that takes courage. More courage than pretending everything's fine. More courage than staying busy just to avoid sitting with yourself. When you acknowledge what's really going on, whether it's confusion, burnout, joy, or peace, you open the door to growth. You stop running. You start listening. And that's where wisdom lives. So, let me ask you, what have you been avoiding acknowledging lately? Is there a feeling you've pushed aside? A truth you've kept buried because it's inconvenient or uncomfortable? Maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to look it in the eye and whisper, I see you. Because once you acknowledge it, you're no longer controlled by it. Now let me tell you about something I used to struggle with a lot. Comparison. I'd walk into a room and instantly scan everyone around me. Who's more confident? Who's more successful? Who seems more in control? And based on those observations, I'd shrink. I'd adapt. I'd adjust my behavior to fit in or please. And that brings me to our next word, adjust. Let's break that one down. Adjust. Say it with me. Adjust. Again, adjust. One last time, adjust. To adjust means to change something slightly to make it more suitable or effective. For example, she had to adjust her expectations after the results came in. Another one, I always adjust the seat before I start driving. And another, sometimes you need to adjust your routine to prioritize rest. Now here's the thing, adjusting isn't bad. In fact, it's a useful skill. But constantly adjusting yourself to meet other people's expectations, that's draining. It steals your authenticity. It erases your essence. I've learned that it's okay not to fit every mold. It's okay to walk into a room and not be the loudest, not be the trendiest, not be the one with the most polished story. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most powerful presence. Why? Because they're not performing, they're just being. Fully. And that's what I'm learning to practice. Being. Just being. Not adjusting every little part of me to be liked. Not tailoring every sentence to avoid offense. Not hiding the messy bits. But being open, vulnerable, and real. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop adjusting for others. When you stop trimming yourself to fit into boxes that weren't built for you. And ironically, that's when you actually start connecting more deeply. People can feel when you're not performing. They lean in, they trust, they open up in return. I remember a workshop I once led where I forgot a key point. My slides were out of order, and for a moment I panicked. But instead of pretending I had it all under control, I just laughed, acknowledged it, and adjusted. And you know what happened? The room relaxed. People smiled. The energy shifted. Because I wasn't pretending. I was showing up as a human being. Now, I want you to think about your own life. Where have you been adjusting too much? Where have you been bending over backwards to meet invisible standards that exhaust you? And what would happen if you let go, even just a little? Let me be honest with you, it's not easy. This world rewards polished over real. It celebrates hustle over rest. It praises perfection over process. But I think things are changing. I think people are hungry for truth, for voices that don't echo the same tired narrative of success equals constant achievement. People want honesty, depth, soul. And the only way we give that to the world is if we first give it to ourselves. We have to learn to sit with our own silence, to acknowledge our shadows, to adjust our rhythms to what our soul needs, not what society demands. Some of my most powerful growth didn't happen during big moments. It happened in the quiet, in the silence between words, in the spaces where I finally stopped running and chose to feel. That's where the gold is. That's where transformation begins. Not with force, but with awareness, with presence, with acceptance. So maybe this week, your only task is this: acknowledge what's real for you and adjust gently. Not out of fear, not out of comparison, but out of love for yourself. You know what's interesting? The older I get, the more I realize how deeply we all crave clarity. Not just the kind that comes from external things, like checklists or 5-step plans, but internal clarity. That feeling of knowing who you are and where you're going, even if the road is foggy. But truth be told, clarity doesn't always come through thinking. Sometimes it comes through doing, through living, through making mistakes, sitting in confusion, and still choosing to move forward anyway. It reminds me of a season when I was struggling with decisions, big life stuff. I kept waiting for the perfect sign, the perfect moment. But all I did was delay. I postponed the conversation. I avoided the task. I kept telling myself, I just need more time. But honestly, I was afraid. Afraid to fail, afraid to be judged, afraid that if I chose wrong, everything would crumble. That fear, it's sneaky, right? It disrupts your peace without making a sound. And right there, you heard the word disrupt. Let's pause here and unpack it. Disrupt. Say it out loud. Disrupt. Again, disrupt. One more time. Disrupt. To disrupt means to interrupt something and cause confusion or disorder. Let me give you a few examples. The heavy rain disrupted the entire event schedule. Another one, her sudden exit disrupted the flow of the meeting. And another, don't let negative thoughts disrupt your focus and your peace. So now you see, disrupt isn't always a loud explosion. Sometimes it's a whisper that pulls your attention, breaks your rhythm, and scatters your energy. And when your inner clarity is disrupted again and again, you start to doubt yourself. You start to feel lost, even if nothing major has changed on the outside. What I've realized is that life is full of disruptions, unplanned delays, unwanted feedback, unexpected turns. But the way we respond to those disruptions, that's where our strength lives. You can't stop the world from changing, but you can learn how to return to your center again and again. And this idea of returning, of realigning with your core, makes me think of another powerful concept, confronting what you fear. And yes, that's our next word. Did you notice how I said it? Let's look at it more closely. Confront. Say it with me. Confront. Again, confront. One more time. Confront. To confront means to face something, especially something difficult or unpleasant, directly. So instead of running from it, you stand in front of it. For example, he had to confront his past before he could truly move on. Another one. She confronted her boss about the unfair workload. And another, sometimes you have to confront the truth, no matter how painful it feels. Confronting is not about being aggressive or loud, it's about being honest. With others, yes, but especially with yourself. It's saying, I see this and I won't look away. It's standing in the fire of discomfort and not flinching. And let me tell you, it changes you. I remember the first time I confronted someone close to me. My hands were shaking. My voice was uneven. But I did it anyway. I said what I needed to say, kindly, firmly. And after that moment, even though it didn't solve everything, I felt free. Because I finally honored my own boundaries. I finally chose truth over silence. So let me ask you, what have you been avoiding? What's the thing that's been disrupting your sleep, your focus, your peace? What conversation have you been putting off? Maybe it's time to confront it. Gently, clearly, honestly. And if you feel fear bubbling up, know that it's okay. Fear means you care. Fear means this matters. But fear doesn't get to lead. You do. Sometimes we think we need more strength to confront something, but what we really need is more compassion for ourselves, for the other person. Because confrontation, when done right, isn't about winning. It's about understanding. It's about truth. And truth, when spoken with love, always brings freedom. I want you to remember something. Growth doesn't always come from big achievements. Often it comes from small, brave choices, like deciding to get out of bed when everything feels heavy, like showing up for yourself even when no one's clapping, like saying, I need help, or I was wrong, or this isn't working. Those are all confrontations, in their own quiet way. And here's something else I've learned. When you confront what's real and stop allowing disruptions to steer your ship, life opens up. You start to feel lighter, freer, more grounded. And isn't that what we're all longing for? Not more noise, not more chaos, but alignment, peace, meaning. Sometimes I write little reminders on sticky notes and put them on my mirror. Things like, disruptions don't define you, or you are strong enough to confront this. Because even though I teach and speak about this, I still need reminders too. I still get scared. I still delay. I still need to be reminded of my own power. So if no one's told you today, let me be the one to say it. You are capable of facing what you've been avoiding. You are allowed to be honest about what's been hurting you. And you are worthy of peace. Not when everything's perfect, but right now. As you are. But I guess what I'm really trying to say is that this constant pursuit of flawlessness can sometimes cloud our ability to appreciate the beauty in our progress. I mean, think about it. How many times have we tossed out of something good just because it wasn't perfect? Whether it's a project, a relationship, or even just a casual hobby, we keep raising the bar to a height where we can barely see the top anymore. And that's not resilience, that's just punishment disguised as ambition. Oh wait, hold on a second. I just used a good one there. Disguised. Okay, but not breaking it down now since we've done our fair share of vocabulary already. So let's stick to the topic for now and let the words come up naturally. I know you're paying attention because you're a language lover just like me, right? You are, come on, say it with me. I am a language lover. Good. Anyway, where were we? Yes, perfection. The chase is exhausting. It's like we're constantly trying to attain something we can never fully touch. I mean, don't get me wrong, goals are important. Drive is essential. But when that drive becomes a source of anxiety and self-loathing, that's when we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what exactly are we chasing? Is it growth or is it validation? Wait a minute, I just used the word attain. That's a brilliant one, isn't it? Let's pause here for a moment. I just said attain. Let's break it down. To attain something means to succeed in achieving it, especially after a lot of effort. It's a formal word, and we often use it for things like goals, success, or high levels of performance. Come on now, say it with me. Attain. One more time, attain. Don't be lazy. I see you hesitating. Let's go again. Attain. Okay, now, let's see this word in a sentence. For example, she attained fluency in English after months of practice. Another one. It took years of hard work to attain his current position. You see, it carries weight. It's not just about getting something. It's about reaching it after effort. Like, He's determined to attain perfection in his art, or many people fail to attain happiness because they set unrealistic expectations. Last one, promise. To attain peace of mind, you must first accept your flaws. Great. Moving on. So yeah, back to what I was saying. We think perfection will bring us peace. But ironically, the more we chase it, the more we rob ourselves of peace. It's this sneaky little illusion that keeps shifting the finish line. You get there and boom, it's moved. And that brings me to another personal story, if I may. A few years ago, I was working on this course launch. I kept tweaking and editing and second-guessing every little thing. It got to a point where I was stuck in this loop, refining every detail while my inner critic kept saying, "It's not good enough." And you know what? The course never launched. At least not then. I was so buried under the pressure of perfection that I couldn't even press publish. And you know what I realized later? People don't want perfect. They want real, they want helpful, they want something they can relate to. And sometimes the most impactful things are the ones that feel raw, imperfect, and authentic. That was a major turning point for me. It helped me confront my fear of being seen as flawed. Wait, let's pause here for a moment. I just said confront. Let's go ahead and break it down because that word is way too useful to skip. To confront means to face something difficult, unpleasant, or challenging head-on. It's not just about standing in front of it. It's about facing it with intention and courage. Say it with me now. Confront. Again, confront. One last time, confront. Good job. Let's use it in a few sentences now. First one, she had to confront her fear of public speaking before presenting to the team. Here's another. It's time to confront the reality that perfection is an illusion. Keep going? Sure. We need to confront our bad habits if we want to change. Or, he finally confronted his past and began to heal. Last one, pinky promise. Sometimes the only way forward is to confront your own insecurities. How did that feel? I hope you're repeating these out loud. Don't just listen. Talk back to me, okay? That's how we practice shadowing and muscle memory for speaking. Now, where was I? Ah, yes, that whole perfection thing. So here's the twist. When we actually confront the urge to be perfect, we often uncover something deeper. Maybe it's the fear of being judged. Maybe it's the craving for external approval. Maybe it's the belief that if we're not the best, we're worthless. Whatever it is, perfection is often a mask for much bigger insecurities. But you know what helps? Embracing progress. Letting ourselves be messy learners. Understanding that improvement is far more sustainable than perfection. That it's okay to show up imperfectly and still make an impact. And if you're someone who struggles with this, here's what I want you to remember. People aren't waiting for the perfect version of you. They're just waiting for you. And you don't have to get everything right to be worthy of success or love or happiness. We grow by doing, not by obsessing. We grow by showing up, making mistakes, and learning from them. So stop hiding behind the excuse of, "I'm not ready yet." Because, spoiler alert, you'll never feel fully ready, but you can be ready enough. And sometimes enough is exactly what the world needs from you. So if there's one thing I hope you take away from this entire conversation, it's this. Perfection is overrated. It's an illusion that keeps us in an endless cycle of self-doubt and hesitation. And I know that sounds cliché, but seriously, take a moment to let it sink in. Because if you wait for the perfect moment, the perfect skill set, the perfect confidence level, you'll never start. You'll be stuck in an endless waiting room while life passes you by. And that's not a fun place to be. And let's be real here. Some of the most brilliant, successful people in the world didn't wait until they were 100% ready. They just took action. They put themselves out there, even when it felt messy and uncertain, because that's how progress works. It doesn't happen in perfect, polished steps. It happens through trial and error, through showing up consistently and refining as you go. Think about any skill you've ever mastered in life. Whether it's speaking a new language, playing an instrument, cooking a decent meal, none of it happened overnight, right? It wasn't flawless from day one. You had to stumble, get frustrated, maybe even question if you were cut out for it. But you kept going. You confronted your struggles, you attained small wins, and slowly but surely you improved. And that's what I want you to remind yourself of every time that perfectionist voice creeps in, telling you you're not good enough yet. Because the truth is, you are enough right now, as you are. And the version of you today is already miles ahead of the version of you who hadn't even started. So take a deep breath and repeat this with me. I don't need to be perfect to make progress. Say it again, out loud. I don't need to be perfect to make progress. Good. Now one last time. I don't need to be perfect to make progress. Because the more you believe that, the more unstoppable you'll become. And hey, before I wrap up completely, let me just say thank you. Thank you for being here, for listening, for engaging in this journey of learning and growth. I don't take it lightly. Every second you spend here, improving yourself, expanding your language skills, sharpening your mindset, that's something to be proud of. And I hope you feel that. Now, before I go, a quick reminder. If you want to revisit all the keywords, idioms, and expressions from today's episode, don't forget to check out the PDF in the description. It's got everything laid out for you, so you can review, practice, and reinforce everything we talked about. And of course, if you found value in this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us keep bringing you high-quality content. Oh, and drop a comment below. What's one thing from today's episode that really resonated with you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, that's it from me today. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep showing up even when it's imperfect, because that's how real transformation happens. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.